Now, Total Recall is a remake of the 90s version under the same name, and that one starred Arnold Schwarzenegger. Recall is about how fantasies can become actual memories, or implanted memories. The plot of the story is how Doug Quaid, played by Colin Farrell, goes into recall because he's suffering from nightmares. And come to find out, once he goes into recall, he finds out that his life is actually implanted. This movie actually stars, like I said, Colin Farrell, Jessica Biel, Kate Beckinsale, and Bryan "I Am the Danger" Cranston. Love that guy. Breaking Bad is one of the best shows out today, period. Now, the story for me, now the action in this movie was phenomenal. I like the action in this movie. I'm a big action guy. But the action for me kind of glorified, it was like glorified action because it covered over a weak storyline. I mean, when I'm a big action guy, I love action to death. I mean, I got Die Hard. Die Hard is one of the best action movies done well. When storyline and action goes together, done well, it makes for a great movie. And this movie had non-stop action. I mean, like I said before, I like action, but when it goes over a weak story, it makes the movie so bland. This movie had two storylines to it. One where Doug Quaid wants to find out who he is, and a Civil War type storyline in there where two different nations are fighting against each other. The opening scene in this movie, I felt that it really could have done without, because I felt that it really told too much of the story. It loses its shock value a little bit. I want to take a journey with the character. And in this movie, that first scene kind of spoiled it for me a little bit. You kind of really knew that, you know, this life wasn't really actually real. And I wasn't really invested in the characters as like I would like to be. I mean, it was kind of like the actors were kind of like going through the motion in this movie. I mean, you have a good cast in this movie. You have Colin Farrell, Kate Beckinsale, Jessica Biel, and Bryan, like I said before, I Am the Danger Cranston. Now, the performances in this movie were good. Kate Beckinsale, I think, gave one of the best performances in this movie, because the other actors in this movie kind of were like bland. Now, Bryan Cranston, like I said, is a great actor, but I think they didn't use him right the way he should have been. And he's supposed to be the main antagonist in this movie. He was barely in this movie. He was like, you can time it on your watch, time the scenes. It's probably like 5 minutes of total screen time he actually had. Now, and I'm blaming that on the director in this movie, because Bryan Cranston can be a great villain if you put him in the right spot in the right situations. I mean, he was like a secondary type person, a secondary type character. He really didn't feel like a villain to me. Like, I mean, the director Len Wiseman, I think it is. Yeah, Len Wiseman. He directed Live Free or Die Hard, which is a good movie. It had great action, had a good story. But in this movie, he used all the action scenes to cover over a weak story, and he didn't use the actors the way they could have been. Now, Colin Farrell, I think he gave like an okay performance. Jessica Biel, I found her character to be kind of useless. I mean, he wasn't really there. I said before, Bryan Cranston, I mean, he needs more screen time. Breaking Bad. I mean, hello, Breaking Bad. Does Len Wiseman has to see Breaking Bad to see Bryan Cranston play a villain? I mean, Bryan Cranston needs more screen time. I mean, who can complain with that? Who can complain how Bryan Cranston needs more screen time? Len Wiseman didn't use his actors to their full potential in this movie. Like I said before, Kate Beckinsale, I think, was the standout of otherwise bland performances throughout the whole movie. I mean, Colin Farrell was going through the motions. Jessica Biel was going through the motions. And Bryan Cranston was rarely used. And it's no fault of his own. He's a good actor, no fault of his own. But, I mean, Kate Beckinsale was the main standout in this movie. And the storyline, like I said before, it had two storylines. This first storyline, like I said before, how he tries to find out who he actually is, that went kind of quick a little bit. And then when he actually did find out who he actually was, they went to the second storyline, and that lasted for about 5 minutes. I mean, Total Recall shouldn't have been remade. It could have stayed back in the 90s. The original version was okay, you know that scene in the original version where he said, "Get your butt to Mars"? They have that in this movie, but it's like, I'm a spoiler alert, it's get to your apartment. I mean, get to your apartment? Really? Really? Get to your apartment? You really gonna use that? This was a mediocre film at best. Save your money, in my opinion. So like I said before, I changed my rating scale for movies now. I do it instead of a 4-star system, I do a 5-star system. So for me, this movie gets a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Yeah, this movie's pretty much a pointless remake. Seriously. So if you like this review, please rate, comment, and subscribe. Subscribing us out. And until next time, Movie Nation.